Yes, and welcome back. Today we are going to, yes, kill Napoleon, or at least he's going to die. The subject of today, yes, is the end of Napoleon. Napoleon, of course, having just returned back from Russia. And I mean, Napoleon is incredible. I mean, he does come back from Russia. His army has been all but decimated, and he puts together another army. And although this army is inexperienced, it doesn't have cavalry, and so Napoleon is in a boxing match, and he's leading with his face, if you understand the analogy. And so yeah, so Napoleon was then attacked by a multinational force, and his armies were not prepared or experienced. I mean, uh, or experienced. That's inexperienced. Sorry. And like I said, he didn't have cavalry. Lord Wellington drove into France. Then at Dresden in October of 1812, Napoleon was decisively defeated at the Battle of Nations in Leipzig. I'm going to sneeze again. Forgive me. And ironically, in watching a lot of these YouTube videos, I found that they actually offered Napoleon that if he'd just go back in the interior boundaries of France, that they would have let him remain as the Emperor of France, King of France. But Napoleon said no. And so he said, all right. And Napoleon then was defeated at the Battle of Leipzig. Now, this was the first big defeat called the Battle of Nations. Napoleon then abdicated, and Napoleon had been, think about it. Napoleon began in 1794 making trouble. This was 1812, 1813, and they finally subdued Napoleon. But that's 15 years of warfare. And, oh no, it's nearly 20 years of warfare. In fact, more if you count the French Revolution. And you'd think that the other guys would have, his enemies in the other country said, let's kill this guy. Let's get rid of him. He's too dangerous to survive. But you have to remember that Napoleon is a hero. If they kill him, they make him a martyr. And you can't have a martyr. Martyr lives forever. And so they placed him in exile on the island of Elba. Now, I swear, I wish we had a map in here. Elba Island is a little tiny island that sits between Napoleon's native Corsica and the Italian mainland. Tiny things, little tiny island. But Napoleon, they give him free reign. You can go anywhere you want to on the island, you just can't leave. And so Napoleon begins to stay there, and he stays there for all of a year. And we'll get back to Napoleon. So with Napoleon defeated, the unity of the Allies was now gone. The key person here was Robert Stewart, this Viscount Castlereagh, the British Foreign Secretary. The Treaty of Chamonix placed the Bourbon dynasty back on the throne of France. So France was now ruled by Louis XVIII. Louis XVI was beheaded. Louis XVII, the child, died in prison. Louis XVIII is the brother of Louis XVI. Yeah. So they placed Louis XVI back on the throne of France. He's king again. It also provided for a quadruple alliance, Russia, Austria, Britain, and Prussia, for 20 years to guarantee the peace terms. The four great powers then conducted and dominated, and this is new and important. Wars are not important. Peace treaties are important in AP Europe. And they set this up at something called the Congress of Vienna. And they then built a barrier of states, small states to surround France, because, even though Napoleon's been subdued, All the countries of Europe look back at the past century and a half, and the instigator of all the wars has been France. And so they establish a group of small German states as a buffer zone against France. The Holy Roman Empire was not revived, and they reestablished the rule of any monarch who had been driven out by Napoleon, and rejected any hint of republican and democratic movements. Please wrap your head around that. One of the purposes of the Congress of Vienna was to stamp out all ideas of the French Revolution. And all those lands that Napoleon conquered and had made all these changes in, they were going to wipe them out. And so all the old crowned heads of Europe were put back on the throne. And everything was supposed to go back just the way it was, although it never really will. Russia, however, took some more of Poland, and Prussia received Saxony. Talleyrand, his real name is Charles Mar. Some people call me the Space Cowboy. Some call me the Gangster of Love. Talleyrand, who is an interesting person. He's interesting because think of this guy, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand. Prior to the French Revolution, he is a nobleman, and he is at the court of Versailles, living the good life with all the other nobles. And during the French Revolution, when everybody else is getting their head cut off, he didn't. He then goes and serves on Napoleon's staff. And now, after Napoleon's been banished, he is representing France. He persuaded the Tsar to accept only a part of Poland to maintain the balance of power. And then, guess what? In 1815, we took a little trip. No, actually, that's the songs, you know. Napoleon escaped from the island of Elba and went ashore in France, and he was confronted by a contingent of French soldiers who were sent there to detain him. And he says, I am here to be your emperor again. And he says, if you don't like it, kill me. And Holt throws open his jacket. And his army then joined him. I'm telling you, they loved the guy. So, French were loyal to him. Napoleon then promised a liberal constitution and a peaceful foreign policy. Yeah. Napoleon was, of course, defeated at Waterloo, which is one of the great battles of all time, and a wonderful song by ABBA. I hope you agree. Not to mention Mamma Mia, yeah, right? But Napoleon was defeated for the final time by the Duke of Wellington with the help of the Prussians and Field Marshal von Blücher at the famous Battle of Waterloo, a battle that is one of the most famous battles of all time. I'm trying to think if it's number one. At any rate, if in the succeeding years after that, if you were walked into a British bar, and if you could prove, and every soldier who took part in that battle was given a medal for their participation, and if you could go in a bar and produce that medal, then you would get free drinks for the rest of your life, no lie. That's how important it was. They finally gotten rid of Old Boney. And so, yeah, they, this time, instead of putting him on some little island in the middle of the Mediterranean, they put him on some island in the middle of the South Atlantic, 1,000 miles in every direction from the nearest land. An island called St. Helena, which also just happened to be a British naval base. And once again, Napoleon was allowed to have the full range of the island. He could go wherever he wanted, just not off the island. Yeah. Napoleon then lived out the rest of his days, and this was in 1815. Napoleon will die in 1821. He kind of lives there, and he grumbles and mumbles and doesn't talk to anybody. And in fact, a lot of people, of course, he's Napoleon. Reporters come, they want to talk to him. Other people want to have conversation with him, but Bleakin was that Napoleon totally ignores him and strikes up a friendship with a little girl who lives on the island, and that's the only person he talks to. And eventually, Napoleon dies in 1821. The official cause of his death was stomach cancer, although years, over 100 years, in fact, it would have been close to 150 years after Napoleon's death, they took samples of his hair from his coffin and they did a DNA scan of it and found large amounts of arsenic. Arsenic is a poison, as I'm sure you know, but it's a poison that tastes terrible. And so, for a person to eat enough of it, to ingest enough of it to kill them, they would know that they were eating it. But it's also arsenic is also a chemical or a poison that if you ingest it in a small amount, you don't taste it, and by ingesting a small amount, it stays in your body. It doesn't leave your body in the form of waste of any kind. And so, yeah, there's, and I happen to believe this theory, that Napoleon probably was poisoned by the British over time. I mean, they weren't going to execute the guy because that would once again be like executing. It'd make him a ghost, a martyr, a hero. But if he died of stomach cancer, well, that's terrible, and he would fade away, which he eventually did. So, all right, so let's get back to this new treaty. Terms were made harsher for France because come on, France. They're like, come on, France, what are you guys doing? We let you guys live. We let you up off the mat. What are you doing? And so, a triple alliance was formed under the leadership of Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Get used to saying those words: Russia, Prussia, and Austria, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. They call themselves the Triple Alliance, but also the Holy Alliance. Yeah, the Holy Alliance. Why holy? Because, first of all, the number 3, Holy Trinity, but also that was their slogan: to make the world safe for monarchy. Mr. Albrecht, have you ever heard of this slogan before? Yeah, sure you have. I bet you have. We'll talk to you later. But yeah, the Quadruple Alliance, the Triple Alliance becomes a Quadruple Alliance. Russia, Britain, Prussia, and Austria was formed to maintain peace, an idea that was unique and unheard of in the 17th century. 18th century. In the 18th century, the statesmen of the Congress of Vienna were very different from their 18th century counterparts. They had seen what liberal ideas and republicanisms could do to destroy their order of power. And so, yeah, the goals of the Congress were to, and this is big, to stamp out the ideas of the French Revolution and to try to maintain a lasting peace. Not necessarily to punish a defeated France. I mean, they really didn't want to do that. They were still operating under the mindset, if we totally pound France into the ground, if we totally make France invalid, if we totally make them too weak, then that will leave a hole, a power vacuum. And eventually some other country will try to fill that vacuum, and then that country becomes, wait for it, too powerful, and it, wait for it, upsets the balance of power. And so, yeah, but they wanted to stamp out the ideas of the French Revolution: democracy, liberty, equality, fraternity. Those are trouble words. They make trouble. You can't have common people thinking that they're the same as, the nobility. Congress had succeeded remarkably in achieving its goal. Now, the Congress throughout the past throughout by historians, has been criticized for ignoring the ideas of nationalism, meaning each ethnicity getting its own country, and liberalism. That is unjust because these forces were non-existent, existed in 1815, but what was important was the preservation of peace. However, look at this last thing, very key here. The Congress of Vienna did succeed in a balance that would not see a major war in Europe for another 100 years. This is called the Century of Peace, 1815 to 1914. Yeah, there will not be another major war in Europe for another 100 years. Oh yeah, there'll be the Crimean War, the British will get involved in the Boer War, and there'll be conflicts here, there, and yonder, the revolutions of 1848, but nothing like the all-encompassing wars of the 18th century for another 100 years. And you know what? With the death of Napoleon, I think it's a good place to end. Yeah, because I have things to do on a Friday, and I'm sure you do too. And so, with that, let's stop sharing.